Hi everyone, good day. Welcome to our masterclass series on change and project management, a pacer for your IT marathon. So in today's masterclass series, we would be discussing about change and project management, and I, Santosh Maivan, product expert from Manage Engine ServiceDesk Plus, will be conducting this particular masterclass series. I've been with Zoho around 8 years and more, and I have experience with service desk plus implementations at different geographical locations. And this has given me enough experience to understand how processes are being implemented, how the product has been configured. So in my webinar today, I will share a couple of tips and tricks as well. Now, before we get started, here is a small update about the GoToWebinar. I request you all to make use of the questions section to ask any questions at any time of the webinar, and at the end during the Q&A, I will have all those questions answered. Also, if you have any issues as well, please do flag them so I could make sure I could address them while working on the webinar. And this is our list of sessions that we had conducted before and the upcoming sessions as well. Do register for any of these sessions for any time slots. Also have your teammates sign up for the masterclass series. The best part is that once after the masterclass is done, we'll send a recording of the recording along with the question and answers answered, which would be really beneficial. The agenda for today's topic is going to be about big move to the cloud. So how an organization that's using the on-premises solution is moving towards the cloud, how it's going to be handled using change management process, and the complicated implementation of the particular change, how well it's been handled using the project management in ServiceDesk Plus, and finally we'll have question and answer. Now we're going to discuss about Zilker, an organization that's planning to move the on-premise services to the cloud. Now, what are the challenges that may happen and what could go wrong? Now, when you're having a bunch of on-premise services that's going to be moved towards the cloud, now there are challenges where the organization needs to understand what are all the on-premise solutions, how they are related with each other. So it could be understanding between assets and services. It could also be an understanding between who manages these services, what are the processes or applications that are connected to them. So there's going to be a lot of this particular issues. Then, how well is the security laid out in your organization? And how well is the firewall or the entire process has been implemented. Now, when you're going to move to the cloud, you're not only going to move the services to the cloud, but there's also a lot of other security and compliance related activities that needs to be in place. You need to bring in your data security officers. You need to fortify your firewall. You need to have the security swept and make sure it's all clean, and then move the services, configure, test it. So there's going to be a lot of this particular process that's happening. Now, this is where when a particular on-premise solutions as on-premise solutions as shown, it's going to be moved towards the cloud. We're going to have a lot of intimidating scenarios that's coming in. So large-scale changes can be very intimidating exactly at this particular juncture. So what are they? Missing details on the change. Now, when a change has been created, it needs to have all the information so that with which the planning, the approval, and the entire process of the change can be conducted. Now, when the details are missing or when you don't have full information, there are a lot of chances that the implementation may go wrong. And ineffective planning. You plan the change based on the details of the change that you have. Now, all of these factors contribute to each other. So that's the reason why the change has to be detailedly documented, and then the planning has to be done. Now, when the planning goes wrong, that's where the change implementation fails. Also, reluctant adherence to workflows. The workflow has to be planned properly, because now when there is a workflow to roll out a change, no one should bypass the workflow. So when the workflow is bypassed or interrupted, that's when the change process gets complicated. Inefficient resources. Now, once you plan the change and you're implementing it, you need to make sure you have sufficient resources to execute and implement the change on time. The change should not be delayed. The implementation should not be delayed. So resource should be planned and lack of transparency. So transparency is really important during IT change management processes because when you create the change and when you like take the change through different life cycles, it's quite important to communicate to the business that what is currently happening and who's going to be impacted. And when you bring down the services, that outage, the scheduled plan outage should be communicated to the business so that no one is raising tickets or like calling in the IT team to register a complaint for known outages. Now, let's take a look and see how good it is to break down the entire change process into smaller bits. Now, when you're having a large change, it's really important to conduct change review. So when every change is completed, so it doesn't matter about the success rate of the completion, but for every change, do a detailed review documentation. This is important because it helps you to understand that how well the change was carried out and if there's any issues, how it was addressed, was it on track? So all these data has to be tracked on the change review so that in future, if similar type of changes are being created, organizations can understand and proceed accordingly. Define time, scope, and cost. Now, when you're planning for a change, you need to know how long it's going to take to implement, what's the time, what's the scope of it, what's the cost involved. So these are things that you need to understand. Then use foolproof planning. Now, your planning should be in such a way that all details of the change are being captured, as well as the planning should not have a single point of failure. It should cover all aspects as as in like how the change can be implemented and what if it fails, how are we going to overcome the situation. Identify critical paths. So this is where your impact analysis comes into picture. Now, when you're planning the change and when it's going for approval, the decisions have to be validated strictly based on the resources you have on hand. So this way, when you have all the critical paths laid out, you would know what you're signing up for and how important or what's the risk involved in this particular change. Assign the right people. Now, with changes being dealt within the organization, it could be quite challenging for users to like decide on the change. On the contrary, you should ensure that the right owners are being assigned to the change. If not, it's going to be very challenging for the organizations. And I've seen in most cases where like changes are being assigned to the wrong change managers or reviewers where they don't action upon them because it's not their part and the change does not move further. It interrupts the deadline. So it's very important that you assign the right owners and orchestrate change implementation. Now, if the implementation is going to be huge, if it's going to take months' time, or if it's going to involve a lot of resources, or it has like a lot of activities, the best way to handle such changes is through the project management. So this is how we could break down the change into smaller parts. Now we're going to see how using ServiceDesk Plus you can minimize disruptions to the business and also how to seamlessly communicate between IT and business throughout the life cycle of change. All right. So in ServiceDesk Plus, you could create change requests and validate them. Then you could plan the change using the rollout, downtime, and contingency planning segments in change. Now, with the change that's been requested and planned, that's the change that you're going to take to secure approvals with IT and business executives. Then you are going to make use of the resource chart or the Gantt chart to understand how the particular change is being implemented. This way, if the resources are overwhelmed with too much of activities to do, you could manage the activities accordingly. Then you could track the progress of large change implementations using projects, milestones, and tasks. And finally, as we discussed a while ago, assure quality with change using reviews. Make sure you always use your change reviews to secure quality changes that's been delivered for the organization. Now, let's take a look at a pacer for your IT marathon using change and project management in ServiceDesk Plus. All right, let's go right into ServiceDesk. Now, before I go into the ServiceDesk Plus application, just so you know that the ServiceDesk Plus Cloud has capabilities to manage help desk for different departments within your organization. So what you're looking at over here is enterprise service management. Now, enterprise service management is all about having different departments going through different processes like help desk, problems, changes, assets, how services caters to those departments, and also the categorizations or the data that's shown in IT is totally different from the data that's shown in other departments. Now, when I look at facilities department, I have my own specific set of assets for facilities. And then when I go right into the request, I have different templates, categorizations, which are specific to the facilities department. Now, on this same scale, there are also like changes that could be conducted for facilities department, which is not as same as what we have in IT. So each department can have its own process, own edition. Now, with regards to the change for today's scenario, it's going to be about IT changes because we're moving the on-premise services to the cloud. So this is going to be dealt with IT. So Services Plus Cloud has the provision where you could track and manage change requests, not just for IT, but also for other departments. All right then. Now, in my change management tool, I have this particular change that is created that explains that what am I going to do first. So here is a change where I'm going to explain what this change is all about and what are each of these components all about. So this change is about moving the on-premise services to the cloud. On the left-hand side, this change is controlled by 6 stages, and each of these stages have different workflow, like different configurations that could be done, different statuses that go through. There's this details of this particular change. While defining the details of this particular change, I can also say what are the CI steps impacting this particular change, which means if I roll out this particular change, what are the assets, which location it's going to impact, what are the other services it's going to impact, then who are all the technicians or the administrators that's going to be involved in this, what are all the assets. So that's something I can decide using the CIs involved, which is a data from part of CMDB. Now, also, once I've done all these associations right from over here, I could click to view how it's related with each other. So this is how, when I'm defining my change, I not only understand the impact analysis, but I can also get a clear picture on how this particular CIs are related with each other on my particular change. Now, let's go back to our change ticket and see what are all the other components that we have. So apart from the CIs involved, I have details of this particular change, such as who are all what is this change all about, who are all the members, what are the roles, when it's supposed to start and end. I have all these details gathered over here. The roles section under the submission stage explains that who is going to play what roles. So this makes us understand that the change is driven through roles and approvals. Then there's also workflow to this change. So we're going to see how the workflow builder in ServiceDesk Plus helps you to build workflows, track where the change is, understand what path it is taking for this particular change to go through. So this is a workflow that's tied to the change template. We're going to see how that works. So once the submission is done, the change goes to the planning stage. Right in the planning stage, I have details such as the impacts, then how exactly I'm going to roll out, my backout plans, my downtimes. Then so downtime is really important to understand how long it's going to take for implementing this change. And to be really honest, based on this downtime is where, and the submission data or the planning data is where the CAB or the board decides to approve or reject this change. So make sure that the planning, the downtime, the submission of the change has all the required information. Then we have associations tab where I could associate incidents that's created by this change or change initiated due to specific requests. I can track them over here along with problems. So change can also be created from a problem, so I could have those associations over here. Now, once my planning is all sorted out, I'm going to move to the approval stage. Approvals are of 2 types. One is the change manager approving the change, and the other one is recommendations. So owners or CAB members that's been associated as a part of this particular change, they could just go ahead and quickly recommend the change. Doing so, they have shared their side of the review for this particular change. Now, the recommendations may or may not be directly in or like looped right to the approval process is because based on my recommendation, once my cabs are approved, the change manager can then decide how this particular change has to be progressed, how this change has to go through. Now, also the change manager, like irrespective of what the recommendation says, they can just go ahead and reject the particular change. So its recommendation is purely like the word of like the comments that different teams share because it's about the nature of the change. Now, since moving to the cloud involves a lot of services and Zilker has a ton of on-premise services that's going to move to the cloud, it's going to be quite challenging during the CAB review as well because each department has to share their views. And during the implementation, the activities may get like delayed or there might be too many confusions because it's a complicated process. Now, I cannot handle that particular process on my task, but using the association, I could make use of my projects to define what my change is all about, capture all the details of this particular change, and then break down this change into smaller parts such as like milestones and tasks. So that's something I can do through the project management in ServiceDesk Plus. And when my tasks and milestones are being completed, which means my project is being completed, which in turn means my change is being implemented completely. Now, finally, we have the review tab. So review is one place where people can just go ahead and define what was this change all about, how was this carried out, like was it done according to the plan, what's been missed out. So all these details of this particular change can be documented in the review, which will be really helpful for auditing purpose. Now, I've personally seen organizations making use of our change management and being benefited during audits. The reason is that the stages are secure, it's siloed out, and all communications that's happening within the change is stored right within the conversations tab. It has the system notifications, the notes that you add. So they are all perfectly documented right within one place. Also, that that there's this workflow builder that helps you to build a robust workflow and guide how the change has to follow through. Also does help auditors understand what is the path it took for this particular workflow to be completed. So this is how the change management in ServiceDesk Plus helps helps during auditing, or helps teams to understand how the change was created, how it progressed, and how it got completed. And also, you need to understand that ServiceDesk Plus Change Management has tight integrations with IT service management capabilities like incidents and problems, as well as to IT asset management and CMDB to understand the impact. And for implementation of the change, it can be done through project management. So this is how multiple entities are related with each other and they could progress, get benefited out of the change module. Now, let's go ahead and see what are all these components, where are they created from, and how they work. So I go to the admin tab and I go to templates and forms. Over here, I have an option to create change templates. It's quite easy. To create a change template, you could just like provide the name of the template and choose what are the fields that needs to be part of this particular template. Now, there are a couple of different fields. So this form exactly looks like an incident or a service form, but there are a couple of fields that does not exist on an incident or a service form. The first thing is about the workflow. Every change template has been associated with the workflow, which means there is a guided path on how this change has to be completed. Now, there are a couple of roles like change requester, change owner, change manager. So these are roles along with many other roles that's there to determine who's going to be part of this particular change. Now, the change flow might be the same for any change that's created for any department, but the only thing that is going to like say who is going to authorize or who's going to review and so on will vary based on the changes that's created for different teams. So it's quite important to have the change roles. Then we have the change stage and status, which has been disabled because the change is set to be triggered or work based on the stage and status, so we don't want users to tamper it. CIs involved is the field that not only just connects your CIs from CMDB into the change ticket, but also gives you the relationship. And also the other way around, when the assets associated to a change are being viewed from the CMDB, it also gives up information such as like how many pending changes are in progress and so on. So CI involved is one key field that needs to be part of the change ticket. Now, apart from all these fields, if you want to add more fields, so from the right-hand side, you could add a section and bring in new fields. So you could actually add sections and add sections of additional fields in. Then finally, you can also have roles. So roles are something that you could create on the admin section and you could use it on the change. So you could decide what roles need to be part of this particular change. All right. Now, once my change template is created, next one is going to be about configuring my workflow. So it's quite simple. I go to the setup and I have automations. Over here, I have workflows configuration. So let's click on it. And under the workflows, I have a workflow for normal process. Let's take a look at what this workflow offers. So this workflow says it starts from submission stage, moves to planning. From planning, it goes to CAB evaluation. In CAB evaluation, if the change is approved, then it goes to implementation stage. And once the implementation is done, it goes to review. Once the review is authorized, it sends out notifications and then completes the particular change. Now, this is how I have done a workflow. Now, it's quite easy to do a workflow. Just drag and drop the stages from the right-hand side. Since we have already used all the stages are not over here. Then you can add conditions to your workflow. So you could say if category is related to network, then you could decide like where it needs to go to. So you could draw conditions for your change workflow. You could also say switch. So it's kind of like field update. So that's something you could do through switch option. So based on the condition, you can have associations to switch. So this is one other feature that we have in change management. Then notification rules and approvals. So these are decisions you can pick on each and every stage as well. So there are use cases where I've seen some customers want the change to be approved while the change has been created and be done with that. So you could decide where the approval needs to be. There are customers like who wants the change to be not denied, but have a loop in such a way that if the change is raised for request for information, it goes through a loop rather than being denied. So this is how you could make use of the notifications and approval sessions to like involve approvals and send out notifications wherever required. Then finally, like field updates, kind of operations such as like based on charts of the values, what operation you need to perform on the fields. And finally, when you just hover the entire like connectors, you can understand from which stage of the change or which pointer of a particular stage the output comes through and where exactly it needs to be set as an input. So that's something you could quickly view by just mousing over the change connectors with other stages or with notifications. Now, this workflow that we have configured is what we have used when you are creating a template under admin or the setup and change templates. So right into the change template, I have now associated the workflow that I wanted to use. Now, the next part is about understanding the roles. The reason we need to understand roles is because, as we discussed earlier, the roles are associated to the change as well as the roles are associated to the workflow for, the roles are associated to the change, and each change would have its own set of people who would be part of the change. So that is why we need to create change roles. So I'm just going to type roles just so you know, and there are like a lot of these roles coming up. Now, also right under the change management, we have change-based configurations and we have change role. So there are like bundle of predefined change roles, which are like system default, and also you can create change roles. Now, when I create a new change role, I can say if this applies for all users or if it's for technicians only. Now, when I say all users, it also applies for requesters. The best part is that when an end user logs in, so this is an end user login, when they go right into their help desk, they get access to the changes tab. Now, this is why, like when you make sure, when you're configuring a change role, you could say if it's applicable for all users or requesters and technicians. And the best part is that you could also enable what they should do, which means on each stage, you could say like they're supposed to view all the stage, and the edit is only possible for few stages, then you could also say if this role is supposed to be set for approval or denial, if this role can approve. If yes, they'll be able to approve. Now, if you look at the cab stage and the approval box, it's disabled, which means right under the cab stage, if someone is going to approve the change, which means that the change is approved. And this is a decision that can only be done by change manager or change approver. So apart from any other operations, the approval of a change can only be done by change manager or change approver. So change approver is a role that can apply for all users or technicians only. Now, this way that either a requester or a technician can approve the change. Now, change manager is a role that's applicable only for the technicians, so you don't get the user choice over here. And these are the two roles that can only approve the change on the approval stage. These are the roles that I have used in my change template. So based on the type of change I'm creating, I can raise, based on the nature of the change or for which department the change is, I'm involving my stakeholders accordingly. Likewise, we saw a workflow that goes from submission stage to planning, CAB, implementation, review, and close. There are different type of changes our customers use. There's a standard change, which means when I create a change request with this particular change type, it is automatically pre-approved. So it does not need to go for the approval process. It is pre-approved. Likewise, I could create different change types, use it on my change templates or change tickets that I'm creating. Then I have change types such as like major, significant, or minor. But what change that we saw right now is a high risk change, which is a kind of a major or a normal change. The reason is that we are moving on-premise services to the cloud, and I could go ahead and say that it has high risk, and it is like crucial change for the organization, and it's a normal change which has to go through all the stages. Now, on the same scale, if there are changes such as emergency changes, I can tweak the workflow in such a way that it just starts right from implementation. So the moment when someone creates a ticket, it goes right into the implementation stage, get it reviewed, and get it completed. So if it's a standard change, I could use the normal change workflow and just associate the change type to standard. So this way, the change is automatically pre-approved. So it won't wait for the approval stage. Once planning is done, it just goes right into implementation. So these are all the components and parts that you could use on your change ticket. So we have seen roles, we have seen templates, we have seen change types, how many different type of changes there are there, and how they are working with each other. Now, everything put together is what you get a change record. And over here, the moment you create the change record, you could understand that on what stage this particular change is and what are the fields that's been captured as a part of this particular change. Now, when my change is now being created, approved, the CAB has been reviewed, and it's now in implementation, you need to know how this change has been carried out. So that's where if you don't see any tasks, which means it could either be as an association, now go right into the projects and see how this particular change is implemented as projects right from within ServiceDesk Plus. All right, so here is a project that says how the services are being moved from on-premise to the cloud by Zilker organization. So this is our project management. So right from the change ticket for the implementation, I could either create a project right from the change, or I can create the problem under the problem section, and I can go ahead and associate I could create a project right from the changes association tab in the implementation stage, or I could create a project already in the projects tab and associate it back into this particular change. All right. Now, here is my project. My project has the details about what this change is all about, what's the project code, when it is supposed to start and end, what are the details of this particular change. So I've gone ahead and added all those details. Now, once I've added those, there are a couple of details that's available here. The next thing is I'm going to break my project into milestones. So I'm going to add milestones that are going to be part of this particular project. And each milestone can be further divided into a lot of tasks. So this is how my milestone has been branched out into different tasks, and completion of these tasks are going to complete the milestone, and completion of these milestones are going to are going to like make you understand what's the progress of the change and how close are you towards the completion. Now, to work on these projects, we need to add members. The members can be either added manually, and this is a combination of requesters and technicians. So the project module can also be applied for requesters and technicians, just like change module. Now, when a requester logs in, they get to see the projects, the changes as well. They could do take decisions or actions right from within the particular logged in tool. Now, if I want to add more members, I could just choose the members. And as you notice over here, Jason already has, Larry Altman already has a project role associated. Now, when Larry Altman is logging in, that person has privileges like a project admin where that person can create a project and work on projects. Now, for this particular project, when I'm adding members, I can say, okay, fine. So right now, Larry Altman has to just play the team member along with the other folks. I can just add it. So this way, not only those members are added right into my members list, but the roles and configurations are changed. So this way, based on the project's role, which has been provided in the profile of a user, when the user logs in, they would have that specific role. Or while creating associating members to a particular project, I can change the access scopes of the role and add them right to that specific project. Now, once I have added my members, I'm going to share who is going to be the owner for every project, every task, and understand that how my resources are being associated with different projects, tasks, or milestones. Now, once this is done, the next is going to be tracking my progress of my project. That I could do using the Gantt view. So Gantt view helps me understand that how are my projects sorted out, how many resources are there. I can filter between weeks, days, and hours. So this gives me more view on what are all my So Gantt view helps me understand that what are the tasks, what are the projects, and how has it been progressing. So I could just choose the view to be like weeks, and on the left-hand side, I have all my milestones, and on the right-hand side, I have my times, like with different tasks. And I can just hover it to understand that what this task is all about, to whom it has been assigned to. So I get all these details right over here. So when I click on select milestones, there are all these milestones, and through each of these milestones, I can determine what are the tasks that's been triggered for this particular time zone. Now, what are the tasks that's been scheduled across different time zones or different calendar dates? Now, this is about Gantt view. This Gantt view would be really useful, will be a real useful tool when you wanted to go for a change meeting. You wanted to discuss about how this particular project is going to be progressed. What are the tasks? What are the overdue tasks? It would really help you to speed up your meetings. It would really help you to gain more insights about your meetings. Now, you could also expand the Gantt view as per your requirements. So you could have this as a tool. Then there's also a tool called resource management. This is nothing but you could actually manage your resources that's working on your projects. So you saw we add different members to milestones, tasks, and projects. Now, when you go into the resource management of a particular project, you could see what are all the different tasks and when it is supposed to happen and whatnot. So you get all these details. Then you figure out that certain users are being tasked with too many tasks, or there are tasks that's left unassigned. All you have to do is just drag and drop these tasks however you would require, and this way the tasks will be automatically assigned right from the resource section. So resource management section. So apart from Gantt view, based on the resource constraints or based on the resource complications, using the resource management, you could actually move the resources in and out. You could smoothen the process. You could ensure that there's no unassigned tasks. So you could just drag and drop and make use of this feature. Now, once all my resources are set, the resources are sorted out with their complicated tasks or overwhelming tasks, the next is with individual owners to go ahead, work on tasks and start closing them. The moment they start closing the tasks, which means they are also invariably closing out the milestones, completing the milestones. And once all of these are done, then the project by itself is successfully done, which is basically the implementation stage of a particular change. And while working on this particular project, I could like add more tasks, and there is this specific area that says about associations, where I could associate requests that are raised during this particular uh, project implementation, because I have a change in place, and to implement the change, I have projects. So while working on my project where I have different milestones and tasks, there are chances where that issues might come up, where I can create those issues and I can attach them right into my project ticket. Now, we have seen how all of these components contribute with each other. We have seen how the changes implementation has been triggered through a project. What are the different phases of this particular project? And then finally, the implementation, once it's completed, then I could just go ahead and move my change from implementation in progress to implementation completed. And I could say implementation successful, and I can click on save. Now, once I do that, now it goes through the next stage, which is going to be review. And to understand where my changes or how my change is progressing, I could just make use of the workflow to understand how the entire progress is being done. Now, once under the review tab, I need to document every single process of my review. I need to understand that if my change was carried out with the set amount of time, with the set amount of resources, what were the other challenges, and what was the delay, what was the approval changes or decision changes. Everything has to go into the review. And once the review is done, the change can be closed successfully. And if my change has any interruptions with the workflow, I could just click on the workflow to understand where it's been halted. Is my workflow, the workflow I designed, did it work through? Or if there was any issues on my workflow, so I could easily figure out from my workflow path. But you look at it, it's all green lines, which means this is the path my workflow has taken and my change is completed successfully. So this is how you could actually complete the entire change process using workflows on change templates, control the members who are going to be participating in this change using the change roles, implement the change using projects if it's a large scale change, make use of Gantt charts and resource management to manage resources and make sure all the activities are being scaled to different users. And again, change can be handled by both requesters and technicians, so it's not necessarily need to be only requesters. So with this, we have discussed the entire change and project management using ServiceDesk Plus. Here are a couple of best practices. Orchestrate large-scale implementations using projects. Seek expert opinions using CAB and change approvals. Keep your stakeholders informed using status notifications and announcements. Make change management a routine process using change templates and workflows. Get a clear vision of risk and impact using CMDB for impact analysis. Then plan your rollout, downtime, and backout plans effectively. So these best practices will help you to seal off your entire change process. Thank you all for your participation and have a good day.